Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, August 29th, 2019. Time for another show. Good morning to those of you who are citizens of the United States. As for the rest of you, or if you're not sure whether you're a citizen, well, you know, I guess you're in trouble. You're just going to have to, we'll see what happens, and we'll figure out this policy as we go forward, or possibly not figure it out ever at all, and it could be kept entirely arbitrary and used against you at any point in the future. Or for that matter, in the past. Why not allow it to be taken against you in the past as well? Plenty to catch up on today in case you haven't figured this one out. Well, we're not going to spend the entire day on it. I don't have that much information about it. People are fighting over what every single word means. But one of the major stories developing over the last, well, let's say 18 hours or so. Well, confusion, dismay, not confusion, anger, or complacency in some cases about a new policy put out by or proposed by the Trump administration that may or may not rob you or your family members of your citizenship. We'll just have to see how it goes. Plenty of bickering back and forth on that one and insistence that the other side is lying. But I thought, I thought we had a pretty well-developed policy about what was or who was and wasn't a citizen when it came to being born to American parents, particularly those perhaps serving the United States overseas when their children are born. So a lot of panic will be induced, maybe for nothing, maybe for a very good reason. We'll just, again, have to wait and see. Why everybody was in a rush to point out that this proposal might have robbed John McCain of his citizenship, I do not know. I suppose that was supposed to shock some people back into their senses, but if you're trying to get through to Donald Trump, or anyone beholden to or serving Donald Trump, I have no idea why you thought that was going to work. That's just silly. He hates John McCain, always did, and would be more than happy to rob him of his citizenship. And the fact that that policy might touch others about whom he does care, or who pay him, or what have you, that wouldn't matter either. As an avowed gimmitarian, the answer is, if I like the guy, he gets to be a citizen, or his kids get to be citizens. And if not, or if they stop paying me, well, then that's that. Sorry, I don't care. You're not a citizen, and it doesn't bother me in the least that it's inconsistent or unfair. That's what I'm here for. So you're going to have to think of a better example than John McCain if you're looking to shame him into something. And I don't know whether it's possible at all. All right. That's it for that topic, at least for the moment. Daily Kos Radio is live now, as you can tell by the fact that the music is over, I guess. Fresh out of coffee. Oh, that's true. I don't drink coffee anymore. Did you know that? I gave that up. Why, I don't know. But I did at one point, and then I thought, I guess I'll continue to give it. Actually, I remember why I originally gave it up. It's just not relevant anymore. But I did give it up. And I don't know. I'm none the better for it. Hasn't changed my life in any way. If you have some inspiring stories about how giving up caffeine has energized you or given you vitality and health, let me know. I'll copy them and claim them as my own, and then I'll feel much better about having given it up. It's a lot less trouble in the morning, and I guess I spend less money on fancy coffee from time to time, but other than that, not much difference. Okay, well, Daily Kos Radio is live now, fresh out of coffee. We'll just pretend that we care about that. Patience and sanity, those things are in short supply. Yes, today, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, turns the broadcast booth, such as it is, over to the bed bugs, and why not? We'll see what happens. Maybe everything happens, maybe nothing happens. We'll see what happens. And here come the bed bugs. They're coming in here. What noise would you imagine bed bugs to make? Munching noises? Biting noises? I don't know. Poor misunderstood bed bugs. Anyway, plenty of other stories, of course, happening this morning. The president up early and angrily tweeting that Lawrence O'Donnell is a big liar. And apparently he had to hedge his bets, if not backtrack yesterday. I didn't see the show last night. I didn't see the show the first time, but it made news. Likewise, it made news that he was, served with a complaint letter from one of the many Trump lawyers out there, in which they insisted that he either apologize and retract what he had said, or I don't know, they had some kind of vague standard about what might or might not satisfy them. Lawrence O'Donnell, for his part, apparently acknowledges that the story wasn't sourced as deeply as NBC News Division ordinarily requires in order for such a story to make it onto the air. And the closest reading I can give you of his apology was that, it didn't meet those standards, and so it was an error in judgment on my part to go forward with the story as though it had met those standards. But I don't think he was retracting the story. So, I'm not certain. But I didn't see the damn thing. That was just a speculation happening before the show aired. And, honestly, it's probably true anyway. So it doesn't matter to me a great deal. I suppose we hope that Lawrence O'Donnell doesn't find himself, thrown off of a cliff or anything like that. We definitely don't want that to happen. But I don't know. The threats of legal action from the Trump team usually aren't that dangerous, quite honestly. And even when they do come to fruition, as often as not, they end up in discovery process that ends up embarrassing to the Trump side of all this. So I just view this as an admission of guilt on the part of the Trump camp. But we'll see what happens. We'll see whether that makes any difference. Greg Dworkin is here now with a collection of stories that I insist that he what's the opposite of cease and desist? Do something. Damn it. Take over the show so I can commiserate with others who don't drink coffee. Good morning, Greg.
You want me to prorogue this stuff, huh?
Yes, please. Prorogue it. Just rogue it regular. Any way you want to do it is fine. Absolutely.
I'll just reclaim my time. We'll do it American style.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like it works.
So Daniel Dale tweeted this morning, I just watched O'Donnell's 2015 apology for questioning Trump's apprentice salary. He was not crying or even close to crying. He was close to chuckling at times. Trump has a long history of lying about people crying. The thing I like about Daniel Dale is he'll just go out and say, he's lying.
Yes, that's good. I'm glad that that's part of his contract, that it's okay for him to say that.
Yeah, or at least it's okay for him to tweet it. I don't know if he says it on the air.
Oh, yeah. Does he go on the air? He does do interviews from time to time.
Well, he's on CNN now, so I don't know. I don't watch CNN very much, so I can't tell you that. But
I
follow his tweeting, and I follow what he writes.
Okay. And you should.
And I should. So the way that I read it, and I really am only following online.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't tweet around a lot about Lawrence O'Donnell claims, and don't forget the claims were that Trump didn't pay much on his taxes, and by the way, some of his loans were co-signed by Russian oligarchs. And yes. O'Donnell apologized for having it on the air. He didn't say it wasn't true.
Right. It is true.
Well, there's no reason to think it isn't, but at the same time, I totally understand why people shouldn't assume it's true, because after all, you got to figure Mueller had a pretty deep dive into Trump's finances with some expert financial folks. Mm-hmm. And they didn't come up with this.
Well, they didn't bring it forward as a charge, and I'm not certain that they would have thought it fell under their purview either. So I'm not positive that the failure, if it is one of the Mueller team to bring charges on this basis, tells us that they didn't discover this. There are a couple of things.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that wound up in the report that they didn't charge. I mean, the part that's confusing in retrospect about the Mueller report is that it's really unclear how far they went. I feel like it's kind of like the investigation of the Kavanaugh stuff. Mm-hmm. We said we did it.
Right.
But what were the parameters and how far were you allowed to go?
Yes.
And I don't know. And I don't know that with the Mueller. Maybe an expert like Marcy Wheeler could tell us that. But it just feels like if there was something this big, that, oh, by the way, on a routine basis, in investigating collusion with Russia or conspiracy to hide it or whatever, That, by the way, a lot of his loans are co-signed by Russian oligarchs. That's such a big part of the story that I can't imagine Mueller didn't look at it.
Very possibly.
It's central.
You would think. Right. I mean, I guess it also, well, once we find out what actually happened, it might make a little bit more sense. It may be that it was a little loose with the definitions to say that it was co-signed by a Russian oligarch. I mean, it may very well have been that loans were collateralized by LLCs controlled or believed to be controlled by Russian oligarchs, and that there's no signature on any line anywhere, or in Cyrillic or any other writing. This could be the case, and that could be enough for Mueller to say, that's not me, that's counterintelligence guys. They have to do that one.
Time may prove me wrong, but Occam's razor says if that were so central that we would have known a little bit more about it.
We will see.
We'll see.
There's a lot that he didn't really feel like he wanted to delve into.
The other side of that coin, of course, is that O'Donnell didn't say it was wrong.
That is true.
So, thinly sourced, one source only, I don't know. We'll see what happens. It'd be easier, if the House would just go ahead and do their job and get his taxes.
Yeah, well, since that ain't happening.
And since that ain't happening, we're left with this, okay, I don't know. Anyway, in the meantime, other stuff, of course, has happened too. For some reason, which is sort of bizarre to me, USCIS confirms as of October 29th, children born to U.S. service members outside of the United States will no longer be automatically considered citizens. Their parents will have to apply for citizenship on their behalf. Subsequent correction, that was from Jim Sciutto over at CNN, and subsequent correction is that, well, if they're both American citizens, that doesn't apply. But if one of them isn't, then the kid isn't automatically a citizen. Mm-hmm. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then, they have a whole bunch of, I'm not really sure how this works. So this really seems like one of those Stephen Miller poorly thought out, let's just, go to the mat on everything on this. And again, I think it's important to put all of this in perspective and consider what we talked about on the show yesterday.
Yeah.
The polling says that when Trump does stuff like this, it doesn't work.
Oh.
People don't like what he's doing on immigration. Overall, people really are starting to think that maybe they're kind of tired of him. His task to get reelected is certainly not impossible, but it's now more uphill than downhill. And it doesn't matter which of the Democrats gets elected or at least selected to run against him. It's not going to be Tulsi Gabbard, and it's not going to be Marianne Williamson. I don't think they're going to make the September cut no matter what. Tom Steyer didn't make the September cut. He may wind up being in subsequent debates if he gets more support and more polls, I suppose. But we're down to 10. It'll be a day's worth of discussion. We'll see who it is. And G. Elliott Morris's point from yesterday still holds, though. The person with the electability problem is Trump. And so doing stuff like this doesn't help. Today, there's a big story in the New York Times, EPA to roll back regulations on methane, a potent greenhouse gas. So basically, he's trying to kill us all. Vote for me.
Hey, all right. That's a great line.
Yeah. And then, by the way, while I'm doing that, let's open up Anwar and let's, do Pebble Mine in Alaska and kill all the salmon. And why not?
I don't even like salmon.
I'm 70-something years old. I don't really care. It's not my problem.
Right. Too healthy. Kill it. We'll just fill the water with Big Macs. Another
story that I'm peripherally noting, I just thought it was interesting. This is from TPM, entitled, Is the NRA Financially Bleeding Out? A recently filed financial audit shows that in 2018, the year before it plunged into turmoil, the year before, the NRA managed to slow the financial bleeding it saw during the previous year, but the audit raised new questions about the gun group's spending habits and its long-term financial viability. There were other stories in the New York Times. I pulled it but didn't necessarily talk about it on the show, about how it's more likely that if you oppose the NRA, you're going to be elected than not elected.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So a deep dive into those numbers show that the NRA doesn't have all that. Here it is. I found it. Doesn't have all that much power anymore. Its main power is convincing Trump that if he crosses the NRA, then his base, the only thing he has left, is likely to get pissed at him. So they call him directly and say, you know, you better not cross us, because if you do, your base is going to get pissed and not vote for you, and then you won't win. And that he cares about. And so that direct line to the president is about the only thing the NRA has left.
Okay.
Why do the Republican Senate in particular just stick to their guns, so to speak? And the answer is for the same reason they stick to Trump. They're stuck. This is the bed they've made. Now they have to lie in it. They really can't turn around and say, okay, we've changed our mind all of a sudden. We're now going to be reasonable, because everybody who doesn't like them for being unreasonable is already voting for somebody else. Plus, they, in many states, continue to represent a rural Trump-like white evangelical base. And so they're not going to change. But for Congress as a whole, particularly in the House side, MBA, I keep saying that, NRA, MBA is much more favorable. NRA is, in terms of the power they wield, is something of a paper tiger.
Yeah, whereas the NBA is growing.
NBA is pretty good now.
That's true, although there may be Russian money behind some of it. You never know, but I don't think that's illegal.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's all in the background. And so what do you do about Trump? Well, we can't do anything about Trump until the election.
No, arrest him.
We could try working on impeachment, and there's more than half the House is there. And so we'll see what happens when everybody gets back from their post-Labor Day foray into the local areas where they come from, and see what people say.
Yes, provided they're not.
But one of the more interesting stories out there right now, I think, is looking at the Bill Welds and the Joe Walshes of the world in terms of what they're trying to do in running against Trump. And to do it with eyes wide open, I think there was this really interesting piece from The Bulwark by Robert Trzynski, entitled, "For Trump Defectors, the Apology is Only the First Step." And basically makes the point that people like Scaramucci and Omarosa are basically grifters, but they still might have something to contribute.
Okay. I mean,
that's what made it interesting.
They can be in my Twitter feed.
My first reaction to such a defection, talking about Scaramucci, is to say more power to him and welcome the return of sanity, one person at a time. But as in the case of Scaramucci, Walsh's chosen form of atonement is self-promotion. Remember the Mooch, right? He was a rider on the Trump bandwagon who managed to weasel his way into becoming the president's communications director for about 5 seconds in 2017 before being unceremoniously dumped for shooting his mouth off to a reporter about internal White House squabbling. The Mooch stuck around for a while trying to get back on the inside. When he gave up, he came out criticizing Trump and promised to atone. His form of atonement has included appearing on TV a lot and promoting his anti-Trump PAC, which I am sure is not totally a scam.
Yeah, all right.
Right? This is a well-traveled path. Remember Omarosa? The cycle goes like this. An ambitious hanger-on flatters Trump, works his or her way into the inner circle, gets fired, cast out, and eventually pens a tell-all or goes on cable news to call the president names. On Trump's side, it's also a well-worn routine. Welcome the new hire, hyperbolic flattery, find him dispensable, goes on to tweet about how stupid, incompetent, and treacherous the person is, who we would never have heard of if he hadn't been hired by Donald Trump. Basically the Michael Cohen treatment.
Yeah, I mean, there's even that cartoon about it, about like people are on a conveyor belt getting stabbed in the back. Mm-hmm. All right.
But Walsh is in some respects a worse case. It's not just that he used to back Trump or ride on his coattails. It's that he was Trump for a long time before Trump even ran for office.
Right.
Walsh's history includes promoting conspiracy theories, the birther and secret Muslim stuff against Barack Obama, the self-rich stuff against Hillary Clinton, as well as promoting his, quote, friend, end quote, white nationalist Paul Nehlen and dabbling in alt-right rhetoric about a war on whites. But what I really remember Walsh for was his apparent vow to stage a rebellion if Donald Trump wasn't elected. This goes back to October 26, 2016. On November 8th, I'm voting for Trump. On November 9th, if he loses, I'm grabbing my musket. You in?
Yeah, he's a mercurial figure, we'll say. Tinged with
what was it, Nayland?
Was
he the one that had the founders sitting around the table getting all upset about current America and wanting to start another revolution?
No, that was a different guy who I don't think made.
You remember the
cut
commercial I'm talking about?
Yeah,
though,
right. Gather your armies, as I recall.
Something like that. Yeah,
right. I think that
same
was
idea.
some
That's why the
loser.
musket was used as the firearm of choice.
Yeah.
He didn't say grab a bazooka.
Right, that's true. Let me see. Oh, I can find that. I know that was the line. Gather your armies. Here's the YouTube. It looks like I can't see the guy's name here. Barber. I can't make it out. It's a blurry screen grab.
Right. But, well, it was a blurry concept. So that
yeah, Rick Barber. That was his name, and blurry.
Yeah, that was
he
a classic. Though.
Alabama Republican. So he's probably signed
this was
on
a classic example of the hyperbolic and dangerously irresponsible style of Trump supporters. You brought up this other one here. If Trump doing this sort of thing makes him, quote, unfit for office, as Walsh now assures us, what does that say about Walsh's fitness? And if never Trump conservatives, this is one of them writing, opposed President Trump on these grounds, then someone whose style and ideas have been substantially similar to Trump's is clearly not a genuine alternative. Now he goes on to say Walsh has apologized, and that's all well. But Walsh's show got canceled, his Shock Jock radio show. Oh. And here's the conclusion. Cases like Joe Walsh and Anthony Scaramucci raise an important question. Now, Scaramucci said Trump critics need to, quote, leave room on the off-ramp for those willing to admit their mistakes, end quote. As we get more weeks where suggestions like buying Greenland and nuking hurricanes are the president's least problematic utterances, more episodes in which Trump displays his dangerous ignorance and impulsiveness as policies like his trade war reach their disastrous end result, and as he looks increasingly likely to lose the next election, we will need to make room for sincere conversions and even for some insincere ones. And that's how you win political battles. Some people are converted to your ideas and your way of thinking. Others find it expedient to pretend that they have been converted. So we should treat these cases as potential harbingers of the future and start laying down some precedents about what terms we will offer to defectors. The main principle is we should be happy to have their vote, which is something I keep telling my progressive friends. I get that you don't want Joe Walsh to be president. Accept his vote against Trump and leave it at that. But not so willing to give them ours. And this is for the people who were, I'm a Republican, oh my gosh, look what's happening. I'm a Democrat, I'm going to run as a Democrat, vote for me, I'm running in the primary. We had a couple of those.
Yes.
And no, we don't have to. We don't have to give you our vote, we just have to accept yours. These are two separate concepts. Yeah. So I say to Joe Walsh, I'm not asking you to be in the Democratic Party. I'm not asking you to run for Congress in a red district so we can have another Democrat.
I don't even allow it.
If you're a jerk, you're a jerk. But if you want to vote for Trump and bring some people with you, more power to you. So this Never Trumper says the main principle is we should be happy to have their vote, but not so willing to give them ours. We should be quick to welcome their support, but slow to accept them back into positions of political or ideological leadership. We need to let the rats leave the sinking ship, but we don't need to appoint them as captain of the lifeboat. So I think that's fine. I think that's an excellent way to look at it. There are some Never Trumpers who really, I think over time, have sort of proven themselves as, no, I'm not going to vote for Trump, vote for any Democrat. I'll name two, David Jolly and Radio Free Tom. I think both of them have basically come out and said, I'm not a Republican anymore. I can't be a Republican, not in this party. And the only way to get rid of what's going on here is to vote for every Democrat and vote them out of power. And they've been saying that for months. And if that's, in fact, the stance that they're going to have, great. You're accepted. That still doesn't mean that if you decide to run on the Democratic side, we're all of a sudden going to vote for you. Yeah, and it doesn't mean that David Jolly was wise enough to say, look, it's not my place to tell the Democrats who to vote for. That's up to them. But, you know, as far as that goes, I can tell the independents like me to not vote for Trump and vote for Democrats. And that's fine. So accept that and stop complaining about it. Stop whining.
Now, I'm open for accepting votes. It's the grayer area where I think even you don't go there either. Is like, oh, well, you know, there are some Never Trumpers who say, well, I will tell Democrats what to do because my vote is up for negotiation. Well, no, thank you.
Well, that's not a gray area.
Yeah,
no thanks. I'll tell you what the real gray area
something
is.
Different. Yeah,
it's not my job to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you from coming from that camp that my wisdom and insight into how these people vote is better than yours. Therefore, you should listen to me. That's the gray area.
Yeah. All right.
That's Tom Nichols. Sure. He's very good at that. Let me make it perfectly clear. He says, I'm voting for any Democrat. And when I mean any Democrat, I mean any Democrat. But here's what you really should do based on what I know, because, I know more than you do.
Yes, well, if you did, we wouldn't be here.
Well, that's part of it, and it is annoying. Sometimes he might be right, because sometimes people do know more, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they're wrong, and, he's sometimes wrong but never in doubt. So it's annoying. And I think our job is to sift out when it's annoying from when it actually makes sense.
Okay. It's annoying.
It's definitely annoying.
I got that.
It's always annoying and occasionally makes sense. So, that's our job.
Okay. I'll let you do the sense part. I'm pretty good at it. That's annoying.
Right.
I can handle that.
Speaking of
yes.
of that sort of thing, I was amused to see that New York Times reporter Jeremy Peters blocked me yesterday.
Yeah.
After he had a really awful, terrible report about the Tea Party that needed to be corrected later and was corrected by the Times because it left out the fact that the Tea Party was primarily a racial anxiety group, not a deficit group. Mm-hmm. And he left that part out of the entire story, and he got slammed online, not by me. I didn't even say anything about it.
So how did he end up blocking you? I don't know.
Maybe he blocked me last month. I don't generally look at it. But I just thought, the Times people are getting really thin-skinned about all the criticism they're getting, and he was a good example of why they get criticized. It was terrible.
Yeah, well, it was lousy, and everyone hated it, and with good reason, and then that is weird for him to block you. Ron Fournier should talk to him for you.
He hasn't blocked me.
Oh, see? There you go. He's blocked me. That's why I can't tell him to do that for you. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I hope we came in on correct timing on that one. Okay, as you pointed out to me during the break, we did have the comment from Mike Musson, who wanted us to know, I guess the clearest way of stating it, O'Donnell presented the whole thing as, well, I think we got it right, that he was just saying it should have, according to NBC's standards, been sourced to more than just this single person or this single source, not simply based on that one. And so he didn't, but basically that he didn't mischaracterize the claim in any way. So he wasn't backing off of that. He was just saying, oh yeah, it didn't meet NBC's standards. So could absolutely still be true and maybe verified by some other source in the future. Of course, I guess another story that traveled a similar path. I forget even which outrage we were talking about. Oh yes, right. The promise of pardons that was first reported by Axios, denied flatly by the Trump White House, and then CNN yesterday afternoon said, well, we tracked it down too, and guess what? We also find it credible and worthy of reporting. So we've confirmed that story. So this denial means that much less because of
well, let me give you, I didn't see the show, but I did see his tweets. Let me give you the two tweets which have not been taken down. first one on the 27th says, a source close to Deutsche Bank says Trump's tax returns show he pays very little income tax, and more importantly, that his loans have Russian cosigners. If true, that explains every kind word Trump has ever said about Russia and Putin. Then the next day, last night, I made an error in judgment by reporting an item about the president's finances that didn't go through a rigorous verification and standards process. I shouldn't have reported it, and I was wrong to discuss it on the air. I will address the issue on my show tonight. I suppose he did. I didn't see either show. I'm reacting to what he had on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that Twitter wasn't quite as nuanced as I suppose this presentation, the way Mike Musson describes it. But the fact of the matter is, we still don't know.
Okay. We know.
Yeah. We strongly suspect it fits a narrative that we would like to believe. Motivated reasoning is something to be guarded against, and it would be irresponsible not to discuss it.
Right. I'm on guard. It's true. Right. I'm just wary of that.
Anyway, I don't know if people want to spend a lot of time talking about the folks, the 11, 12, 15, 17 people that didn't make the cut for the
well, I don't know.
debate.
Yeah,
I mean,
people
like Kirsten Gillibrand,
that's not funny.
Ran a decent campaign, but didn't make any headway.
Yeah.
People like Marianne Williamson doesn't need to be on the stage at all.
Right. I'm not that worried about it.
Tom Steyer tried to buy his way on and didn't quite, but he still might be able to get into a subsequent debate. We'll have to see about that. I don't think he's ceasing and desisting in terms of spending money on ads.
Right. Okay.
Just to name a few. And Tulsi Gabbard is still somebody who I think is unworthy of being on the stage. Whether she decides to run third party or not remains to be seen. So I think right now the political world was it's one of those interesting things that happens, and you scratch your head and say, what's the big deal? Johnny Isakson, for medical reasons, I think he has Parkinson's, is resigning his position as of next year, and that means there'll be two Senate seats in Georgia up for grabs in a state that's trending purple.
True.
Stacey Abrams still wasn't able to get over the top in terms of the governor race, and she so far has ruled out running for the Senate.
Yeah.
And that means that we don't have a clear picture of who's running in either of those seats.
Right.
So people were starting to describe it as everything's changed now because now the Senate is up for grabs. And I'm scratching my head and say, how so? I mean, you got to win those seats before the Senate really is up for grabs. And you have to hold on to Doug Jones in Alabama, and you have to pick up, perhaps better odds for things like Martha McSally in Arizona, even a Susan Collins, who is certainly vulnerable, and I would like to see her lose, and there's a very good candidate running against her, but she hasn't lost yet. So a lot of that stuff gets reported out yesterday as this is a game changer. Everything changed. That was Chuck Todd's line on Meet the Press yesterday. And I'm looking at this and saying nothing has changed. Trump is still not the favorite to win. There's almost maybe 10% people are giving a chance for the Republicans to take the House. Democrats are still upset. They're angry. They're ready to vote. They're not complacent. They're not smug. They're ready to get out and do what they did in 2018. And that was true before the Isakson story. It's true after the Isakson story. The Senate's still an uphill climb for Democrats. That was true before the Isakson story, and it's true after. And until they start getting some quality people to run in those races, the Senate still looks like, a tough win. On the other hand, it now appears possible in a wave election where the Democrats can take all three.
That would be good.
House, Senate, and White House. And still lose the Supreme Court for a while. But
you don't get the vote.
You don't get the vote on that. Those appointments last a long time.
Maybe we could prorogue it.
What I'm trying to say is it's just so interesting that you can have the facts in front of you. And this is the way people vote, too. You can have the facts in front of you for a long time, and one little thing will happen, and what it does is it raises hope, and hope changes everything. It changes the narrative. Now all of a sudden this is possible, and that's possible, and this might happen. And it's the same, It's the same battlefield that it was the day before. But now people are looking at it differently. I just think it's so interesting when something like that happens. For those people who have hope and they prematurely declare it, then they get pounded by the conventional wisdom people. They're saying, you don't really know what you're talking about. How can that be? Look at this. McConnell's going to be there forever and nothing's going to change. And now all of a sudden everything has changed. And you go, well, I said that last week. And they go, well, yeah, but I mean, everything changed with Isaacson. Well, who's running against Isaacson that we're going to win that seat, that everything changed? Well, that's not the point. See, everything's changed now.
Well,
wave your hands and say, bah.
Yeah. Had I heard your opinion earlier, I might have said something different. But I've now said this on television, so everything's changed. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a possibility.
It's interesting watching this. But, as you know, we blog. We're old school.
Yeah.
Whether it was the Iraq War or otherwise, we tend to be a little ahead of the curve, and it's just interesting watching people catch up with you.
Yes. Well, that's.
I don't mean me. I mean us. Those of us who are online paying attention.
Yes. And it all comes from someone else's original reporting. I never stop pointing that out. It's just odd how sometimes, I don't know, somehow reporters either don't read their colleagues' work. That could be the case, or they forget what they wrote themselves, or they were just making it up as they were going along back then, and that's why they don't remember. But
well, it's weird. I mean, I'm very friendly with online, but got into a tiff the other day with Philip Bump over at the Washington Post because there was one of those Aaron Blake asked me anything.
And you asked something?
AMA things, and Philip Bump said, "Aaron's having an AMA. Why don't you ask him something?" I said, all right, fine. How come you guys never say that Trump lies, and how come you won't talk about his mental status?
Yeah.
And Philip got all upset about that. Oh, it's you liberals that are pushing this mental status stuff. And so I sent him like 15 different conservators who are saying this guy's losing his mind. In fact, this morning I sent him one from Gail Collins, because there's a piece in the New York Times along those lines, entitled "Is Trump slipping even more?" Hard to judge when business as usual is bonkers. And all I was trying to say is I was quoting that a study we talked about on the show where headlines are read more than the stories, and that when you have headlines from different media, the cumulative effect is important. So if everybody is going to be talking about Hillary's emails, that's going to get into the public consciousness. They don't have to read the stories and know the details. And, of course, that's the conservative goal in trying to push the story everywhere. So the story out there is that Trump is not necessarily completely with it, and you see it from different places all over the place. But there are certain people who say, I can't say that. I can't say that he lies because I don't know what his intent is, and I can't say that he has some mental issues because even though it's obvious to everybody and you're all talking about it, you civilians can do that. But we reporters have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, which is basically to never report what you're actually seeing and put it in context.
That's what it comes down to. And I mean, that if that's the answer, then that's what you say, and you're asking me anything. How can you get mad at anybody for asking something and then ask me anything?
Yeah, so it was just a weird conversation. Some other reporters came in and say, wait, this is a legitimate thing. Why are you getting so defensive about it? Yeah. And so it went downhill from there. But, I think it was an important point to bring up. And I think that people, it's one of those things where if Trump did something or said something or somebody within the White House said, I really worry about his cognitive abilities slipping since the time I met him, all of a sudden, this is one of these things everybody knows, and now you're allowed to talk about it.
I guess so.
And everything has changed. And then, it's another one of those. Johnny Isaacson retires. Everything has changed for the Senate. All of a sudden, everything has changed for Trump. And now you're all allowed to talk about it. And we call this permission structure. And it's just so interesting to see how that works. So if somebody who is, outside of the profession, not a reporter, asks a reporter, how come you don't talk about his mental state? We're not allowed to do that. There's the Goldwater rule, and it's just one of those forbidden things, and there are guardrails, and you can't do that in professional society. And somebody like Scaramucci, who has no qualifications whatsoever, will say, Trump's really losing it. Oh, my gosh, this is a big story. Look what somebody inside the White House said. Or what if a Jim Mattis said that?
Right, yes.
And all of a sudden, oh, my gosh, we have to write about this. This is clearly a story the American people need to – and you scratch your head and say, wait a minute. This is the same guy who had these same issues for years. That's like you discovering that Trump is a racist.
Yes.
And that Stephen Miller is a white supremacist.
Amazing.
What did it take for you to actually be able to say this on your own time, in your own way?
Yeah.
What constraints are here? Is it your editors? Is it your publisher? Is it yourself? What's going on here? And, of course, that's stuff that they are completely opaque about, never transparent, and get really upset when you ask them about it, and that's how you get blocked by New York Times reporters.
Mm-hmm. That's how these things happen, I suppose.
So, anyway, I'm just saying it's an interesting process to watch.
Yes, and I think they should get rid of the name Ask Me Anything. It's clearly not true.
Yeah. It should be Ask Me Anything except...
Yeah, except what you're interested in.
Right.
Everybody wants to know the answer to that question, and I mean, there's an answer that they frequently give, but then they wouldn't give that. They were just mad at you for asking. All right. That's very dumb.
Here's a piece, a little Washington Post analysis here, which I think is interesting in the context of who you watch and who you believe, which is sort of a subtext of what we were talking about here. Mm. And Aaron Blake writes, 52% of people who have a favorable opinion of Trump say Fox News is their most trusted broadcast news source. 60% of those who strongly approve of him say that. In a 2020 matchup with a generic Democrat, 54% of Trump's support comes from Fox First viewers.
Okay.
All right. But Fox said some unkind or accurate, I can't tell which, things about Trump, and Trump went off on them on Twitter. And the headline here is, Trump had better be careful about hate tweeting Fox News. The president is threatening to steer viewers elsewhere if Fox doesn't toe his line. Mm-hmm. But in 2020, Trump arguably needs Fox more than Fox needs Trump.
Maybe.
Right? And here's the tweet. I don't want to win for myself. I only want to win for the people. The new Fox News is letting millions of great people down. We have to start looking for a new news outlet. I guess he means OANN. Fox isn't working for us anymore.
Ha.
And, of course, Aaron Blake and everybody else, even Brit Hume, picked up on working for us. We don't work for you.
Yeah, well.
Now, in Brit Hume's place, it's too late to rehab yourself. Let's go back to that Joe Walsh discussion we were just having. But, the idea that Trump would even say in public that they're working for me is bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Well, he thinks of everything in those terms. So.
Right.
Okay.
So, put a little more plainly, given the fine margins Trump is dealing with in his re-election campaign, that's a fancy way of saying he's not really ahead at this point, Fox News could help sink him. Fox can lose some viewers and win the ratings wars. Trump basically can't lose any supporters and win re-election. Okay. You could even make an argument that Trump needs Fox more than Fox needs Trump. Even as Trump was tweeting his not-so-veiled demand for more obsequious coverage, USA Today and Suffolk released a poll Wednesday that showed the significant overlap between Trump's base and Fox. To wit, among those who strongly approve of Trump, 60% trust Fox News more than any other TV outlet. Fox also accounts for 36% of those who simply approve. In a 2020 matchup between a generic Democrat and a third-party candidate, Trump earns 54% of his support from Fox News voters, and of the 41% of people who have a favorable opinion, more than half say Fox is their most trusted news source. And among the remaining people who say they like Trump, most don't have a favorite news outlet. 16% of Trump supporters named some other outlet tested: CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, C-SPAN, Comedy Central, or PBS.
Sure.
In other words, among people who seem to rely on TV news for their information enough to have a favorite, Fox First viewers account for 4 out of every 5 Trump supporters. So on the one hand, not good for Trump to criticize Fox. On the other hand, my takeaway there is 16% who get their news from other than Fox. 16%, that's a lot of Trump supporters who get their news other from Fox, and that's why it's important to say that he lies and say that he has some mental decline, if that's what you think, or if there's evidence for it, and so on and so forth, and not shy away from those things, because Trump supporters are going to hear about that from those other outlets.
I guess so. I guess it depends on what those outlets are, but
yeah, I mean, if it's OANN and Facebook, right, or Sinclair, you're not going to hear it. But if it's the aforementioned MSNBC, ABC, NBC, so on and so forth, then I think those are important.
Okay. My primary news source is the Spike Network.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What about ESPN?
No, not at all. But exciting action movies and explosions are my news.
Explosions are good. So I'm going to send you an image, and this is going to be the last item I'm going to talk about. But Mike Bitzer, who's a political scientist in North Carolina, has been following the North Carolina 9. We talked about his special elections coming up.
Yes.
On the 10th of September. And we talked about it on the show yesterday in terms of the early vote. But he has a really interesting set of charts that he put up. And this one is looking at the North Carolina Cooperative Congressional Election Study 2012 presidential vote choice by party identification.
It's a long title.
Okay. 52% of those who voted identified as Democrats and 40% as Republicans and 8% as independents.
Oh. Okay.
Right? In 2012, and this was a relatively close election in 2012, what happened is that the independents voted by actually a pretty big margin. 60% voted for the Republican and 33% voted for the Democrat.
Okay.
Whereas within each party, the vast majority of the party registrants voted for their own party. So that 60% Republican and 33% Democrat in 2012 is how Obama narrowly lost North Carolina. In 2008, on the other hand, 43% of the independents voted for the Democrat and 48% voted for the Republican. Instead of 33-60, it was 43-48. And Obama narrowly won North Carolina. The point of that is that those 8 or 9% of independents are the ones that generally decide the close races in North Carolina, at least, and I suspect elsewhere as well. And you don't have to completely win them over. You just have to keep the margins close in order for you to win. In a place like North Carolina where there are more registered Democrats than Republicans, even though Republicans have been winning the elections there.
Yes.
With exceptions, you know. So it is a purple state. It tends to lean Republican. It's a center-right state. And the reason it is because the independents in North Carolina tend to lean Republican. But when you can cut those margins down, you can win. And Obama showed that in 2008. In 2012 and in 2016, the margins were much greater for Republicans with those independents. So what does that show? It shows, first of all, that there really are true independents, excluding the leaners, and they can number anywhere from 8 to 9% here. We've talked about 7% that Pew identifies. 7 or 8% of the population in close races is a big enough pool so that you do want to pay attention to them, not the Republicans. You're not going to do anything with them. They're going to vote 90% for Trump no matter what. Hopefully it's a shrinking pool. More of them are independents. And those independents are a group that you can go after.
All right. Well, let's figure out how we can get started on that.
Yeah, well, that's where the persuasion part comes in.
Oh,
now, you have to get the turnout part. You have to get your own party to turn out. You have to get excited about that. But Jesse Ferguson's point that you really have to do both is still true. The turnout part is probably the bigger part, but the persuasion part is enough to win or lose with, and that's the only point I'm making here.
Okay.
But it's just interesting to see the actual data to show that, yeah, that's true.
Yes. Is there any way that we could use nuclear weapons to win this?
I don't think North Carolina would be the place you would do it.
I mean, it's been suggested. I'm just saying.
I would have other states higher up on my list personally.
All right. I'm just checking. I mean, what if they get hit by a hurricane and we just are saying, well, we were trying to hit the hurricane?
Well, I think you're talking about Florida there.
We missed. But, that's all down there, something, south, right? And we missed by a lot, more than we thought.
By the way, we're going to have to really watch the weekend and see what happens with that storm. It missed Puerto Rico. It's going to possibly do what Andrew did, just, come straight west onto Florida and hopefully not turn up and hit the panhandle again, but we'll have to see what happens. So that's not a good situation. And, of course, it's not a good situation that all the FEMA money has been taken to build the a wall that Trump can't build because, people own that land. So Trump said, just go ahead and take it from them.
Yes.
That was the other big story.
Have we considered a hurricane wall?
Yeah.
It's
hurricane fencing, right?
Yeah, they have that. So
they do have that.
Why aren't we putting that in the ocean?
Yeah.
That's what I say. I say just don't even bother building it. Got to do it fast. Dump rolls of it directly into the ocean. We'll see what happens.
Right. Anyway, so to summarize today, Trump is still Trump. He's always been who he is. Media is starting to talk about the fact that he's got issues. They're starting to talk about openly that, he may not win, and then what? They're talking about what happens with his sycophants if he doesn't win, and that's kind of an interesting subtext there.
Yeah.
And looking at the independents, you can see how he could not win.
Yes, they should get together and talk about that. I bring up the nuclear weapons only because I see that while we've been on the air, Trump has threatened to nuke Afghanistan again.
Has he?
Same line, yeah.
Are they having a hurricane?
No, but they could. Well, all right, they are having a hurricane. Be fine. You can have it your way. Whatever you want to call it. Somebody has, I don't know, it came up. He's yelling over helicopter noise somewhere, I guess, and he gave the same line of, I could win that war in Afghanistan in 10 seconds if I wanted to kill 10 million people. Yeah. That was ill-advised the first time, but he's brought it back.
Yeah, I don't want to say this is playground politics or anything, but my father can beat up your father.
Right. And 10 million of your fathers, as a matter of fact.
Mm. Anyway, nice. I'll leave you with that. You got another couple of minutes before the break, and then the next hour, of course, is yours. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. And I sent you a coffee GIF so you can enjoy yourself.
Excellent. Oh, I see. Very big cup.
Yeah, well, see what he does with it. Oh. So you don't have to drink it. You can just pour it on yourself in the morning. That's another good way to wake up.
Oh, my.
And I will be back on Monday.
Yeah.
And we'll talk again, maybe.
Okay, very good. Unless we're nuked or have bad weather or both in between now and then.
Or I'll talk, and I'll just interrupt.
Yeah, all right. I'm on board for that.
SOP.
Okay.
All right, I'll talk to you.
Ready to roll. Okay, thanks very much. Have a great weekend. You too, Abby. Don't get upset. I'm not leaving you out of this. I appreciate that. I guess something must be going on now because Daniel Dale is on a tear telling us what the president is saying. I could probably take a look at I'll take a look at his thread and see why he's talking at all. I guess that's an interesting question. Oh, he's called into Fox News. Even better. So it's been going on for some time, and maybe we'll work our way into the break by catching up on what he's talking about here. Daniel Dale following it as always. He's called into Brian Kilmeade's Fox News radio show. So the television must be broken. He says, Florida will be totally ready for the hurricane, even though, quote, according to the folks over at Weather, the state's going to be hit. Trump says you have to judge his dealings with China at the, quote, end product. He says China has been ripping off the United States like babies. That's interesting. So we're away from the dogs and onto the babies. Okay. He says he was dealt many, quote, bad hands, I guess smaller than normal, like with China and North Korea, but is going to win with everyone because he's so awesome at poker and gambling and running casinos. Trump says China plays a vicious game by targeting U.S. farmers, but it has made up for it with his $28 billion in aid. What? He has made up for it. With his, giving away $28 billion in tariff damage support, supposedly, to farmers, even though many of them actually turned out to be Chinese LLCs. Many farmers say that the aid doesn't make them whole or replace the long-term trading relationships Trump has damaged, he includes parenthetically. So I guess the first part of the game is about China. Let's see. He's told about Pat Toomey's remarks about the trade war slowing the economy. Trump angrily says, what does Pat Toomey want me to do? Does he want me to say, let me put my hands up, China? Continue ripping us off. Let me give up right now, China, even though we're winning? Yeah, huh? I don't really know what Pat Toomey wants. Let's see. Some more false claims about the USMCA, the alleged trade pact that he's worked out with Mexico. Look at this. Trump says of Mexico, quote, I happen to like him right now because of its decision to put soldiers at its borders that thwart asylum seekers heading to the U.S. I happen to like him right now, so that's nice. I'm sure they'll be glad to know that. Let's see. Okay, here's the Afghanistan part. Trump says the U.S. definitely needs to keep a, quote, presence, at least near Afghanistan. He says, for some reason, and I don't know if anybody really knows why, let's find out, there's a confluence of challenging countries around there. It's an amazing area for terrorism, he says. Oh, what a great insight. Trump again says that the U.S. is not fighting a war in Afghanistan, just policing. He says again that he could win the war, which we're not fighting, by killing 10 million people, but I'm not looking to kill a big portion of that country. Now, that was a nice thing for the president to say. Let's see. Then some Iraq thing. Trump falsely claims he's been saying from day one that the U.S. should not go to war in Iraq. That's not true, as we know. Some word about Deutsche Bank. Trump again rejects the widespread past reports about how banks except Deutsche had shunned him, claiming the banks wanted to do business with me. They just didn't or wouldn't for some strange reason. I don't really know why. He says of Deutsche Bank back in the day, that was the Rolls-Royce bank. That was Germany you were dealing with. Okay. Trump says that Deutsche Bank, the bank that did loan to him, was, quote, the ultimate bank before more recently falling on hard times. So there you have it. Okay. And then he launches an attack against Lawrence O'Donnell. We know how that's going to go. So I think we're up to date, at least on the previous 15 minutes or so of his phone call. We'll see whether anything truly absurd has happened in the time since during our 1-minute break away from the microphone just to reset ourselves for the second half of today's show. Let's see. Anything more? I don't know. Looks like he's bragging about crowd sizes at this point. All right, we'll come back, reorganize, launch into our second hour after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess one last thing to add from this morning's radio conversation between the guy allegedly serving as President of the United States and Brian Kilmeade. I see here, let's see. First, I guess the tweet, who is this? Eamon Javers, Washington correspondent for CNBC covering the White House. I guess he had a question asked directly if a Russian oligarch co-signed a loan to him, as Lawrence O'Donnell says, a single source alleged. Trump says, quote, I don't believe he has a single source, but doesn't answer the question directly. Interesting all by itself. Susan Simpson noting off of that report, Kilmeade tried several times to interrupt Trump's ranting to ask whether he had Russian co-signers on any of his loans, and Trump wouldn't answer. So the answer is yes. I'm whispering that to you so you'll know. Don't tell anyone. He seemed offended by the idea that he'd ever need loans in the first place, and instead kept talking about how he loved cash deals. Yeah. Wow. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, obviously, he's doing everything he can, for some reason, to make it sound like Lawrence O'Donnell's story is true. And I don't really know what to make of that. Yesterday, where is this? Let me see if I can call this thing up. I retweeted something yesterday that, because, let's see, it was of some interest to me because we had just read so much about Paul Manafort and his machinations in Ukraine. But he was, someone had brought up the clip of him on TV, I guess, during the campaign, being asked about Trump's claim not to have any deals or any business relationships of any kind with Russia, in Russia, with anyone Russian, etc., etc. To do I play that on here? Let me see if I can bring up the volume here. So, this is, so Brian Tyler Cohen was the one who I saw retweeting this yesterday. Let's see. On-camera host and former managing editor of Occupy Democrats. How do you like that? And former contributor to Huffington Post. Anyway, this was an old but good find. It was just relevant for the day. So this is Manafort stammering his way through the answer to the question. So is it true that he has no Russian deals and no Russian dealings of any kind? Let me see if we can play this on the air here.
So to be clear, Mr. Trump has no financial relationships with any Russian oligarchs.
That's what he said. That's what I said. That's obviously what our position is.
I just love this stammering. That's what he said. That's what I said. He didn't say. I can't say he said it. I mean, he did say it. I can't say he said it or reaffirm that he said it because that'll make it sound like I think it's true and it's not true. That's what I said. Wait a minute. I don't want to get myself in trouble. That's even worse. That's our position. Obviously, that's our position. That is a fantastic answer. So, yeah. And then for him to be asked directly by a friendly interviewer today whether or not he ever had any loans co-signed by any Russians, and not to deny it, but rather to, rant about other things and pointedly not deny it, is, well, interesting to say the least. To say a bit more, it's confirmation that it's true. Okay. Anyway, so about that, just, I guess, to expand on it a little bit, I know that Greg had mentioned, well, maybe Marcy Wheeler has some thoughts on that. And we can check in on her Twitter feed and see what she has to say about that. I guess one thing, before I do that, I want to address the frog in my throat. Frog, please. It's time for you to clear out. It's well into the show now, and there's no excuse for this going on. But Meredith, listening to the show, has said about the Isaacson race, pointing this out. We haven't made this entirely clear. Isaacson's term has a few more years left. Is it 3? I think he was up for, I guess that's how you're getting to 3. It's 2019 now, but it's late 2019. Term goes through, he's up for election in 2022. So 3 years left. And she says, I believe the governor has said no primary or special election. He will appoint a replacement. So I bring that up just to point out, what will be happening here is that in the immediate short term, they don't like to leave vacancies. What usually goes on here is that an appointment is made so that the Senate seat is filled temporarily, sometimes with a caretaker, sometimes with someone who intends to stand for election, but you don't just get the balance of the 3 years. And I'm trying to think of whether that varies by state or whether you have the option of having it vary by state, but no one does it. But I think what the plan is to appoint, obviously, a Republican to fill the seat, but a special election does have to be held, though there doesn't necessarily have to be a primary election for that to select. The parties have several options on how to select their candidates for the general election. But usually the rule is you appoint someone and they serve until the next general election can include a special election to fill the balance of that term. In rare occasions where there isn't enough time between the vacancy and the next general election to hold a, legitimate election with enough campaigning time, they sometimes will delay things until the next one. But all you get in an appointment is an appointment until the next viable, feasible general election is held. And you can run to win the balance of the term, but very rarely is the balance of the term given away in its entirety with an appointment. It generally only happens at the very end of a term where there isn't another general election coming up for, well, if you're appointed to the last 18 months to possibly up to 2 years of the term, the next general election is 2 years away, so they just let it lie for those 2 years. 3 years, though, too much. So I think that's what's happening down there. Let's see. There's another question here from Brian Monroe, who asks if we've talked about this, but it's a link to Popular Mechanics. Oh, good. I'm glad this is the link. No, I haven't, but I think that Scott, it wasn't an accident, but I think Scott referred to it in the afternoon wrap-up show the other day, and I intended, it was like a great call on his part. I intended to go there, and maybe it was obvious in the subtext, but I didn't get to this one. This is a good point, but when we last addressed the issue of the weird radioactive explosion in Russia by mentioning that there was was it Foreign Policy magazine who had, let's check Pocket. I don't think I archived that because I didn't get all the way through it. The piece, Is Russia's Doomsday Missile Fake News? Do you remember that I brought that up? And I meant to lead into this story. So, I don't know, maybe we'll shift gears and go here rather than, what the hell was I going to do otherwise? Oh, yes, Empty Wheel and the loans. I don't know. My quick scan of the Empty Wheel Twitter feed yields mixed results. Maybe we'll come back to that later. But let's jump back off this track because of Brian's excellent question here. So the other day there was this Foreign Policy magazine piece. Amy McKinnon, Lara Seligman, I don't know if I credited them with this August 22nd piece. Is Russia's doomsday missile fake news? Experts are skeptical that Moscow has the money or technical know-how to field Putin's promised arsenal. It doesn't look like a overly long article, but let's pick it up. Why not? Russian missile explosions are kind of important. Russian President Vladimir Putin seemed to confirm on Wednesday, it would be last week, right? Something that international weapons experts had already suspected, that a deadly blast at a military site in northern Russia that caused a spike in radiation levels was the result of testing what he called a promising new weapons system. The Russian leader didn't specify the name of the weapon, but the trail of evidence suggests that the August 8th test, which was responsible for the most serious release of radiation since the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Did we ever determine? I think here in America we like to say Fukushima, and I'm not sure where the emphasis is supposed to fall there. And I have the feeling that it might be Fukushima, but I don't know for sure. Not Japanese. Anyway. Most serious release of radiation since that was related to the 9M730 Borevestnik. I've got no idea. That's how the Russians would refer to it. And here on the English-speaking side of the table around NATO folks, they go with SSCX9. X is cool, so they put the X in there. X9 Skyfall, as it has been termed by NATO. The theory was bolstered on Tuesday when Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, confirmed that the test was of Russia's development of a nuclear-propelled missile. So that was the theory that everybody was going with, and that was the amazing and scary idea that we first landed on. But not everyone is convinced that the blast was a result of a botched missile test. Michael Kaufman, a Russia expert at CNA, said that while it was undoubtedly a test of a nuclear reactor for military application, there wasn't enough evidence to say specifically that it was for the Skyfall. Russia has quite a few different weapons projects, a few different nuclear power projects, Kaufman said. It could have been a test of a component of another weapons project, he added. Whatever the cause of the explosion, arms control experts remain skeptical that Russia has the money and technical know-how to make the Skyfall a reality. Maybe they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, but I don't think it can all stick, said Ian Williams. Not everybody throws spaghetti, by the way, at walls. But anyway, he is the Deputy Director of Missile Defense Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, who added that he is skeptical about Moscow's ability to see through development and production of the Skyfall. It's just the novelty of it. No other country is even considering this kind of thing. Oh, who would? And it's the most technologically unproven, probably the most expensive in the long run, Williams said. Whether or not the accident was indeed related to a new weapon, the nuclear-powered cruise missile that Moscow claims will be able to fly around the world for days or even months and to skirt U.S. missile defenses, Putin's remarks were just one part of a pointed campaign to reestablish Russia as a major player on the world stage. In a March 2018 State of the Union speech that shocked the international community, that's them being shocked, Putin unveiled several next-generation nuclear-capable weapons that he claimed would render U.S. missile shields useless. They're mostly useless as it is, I think, but during the presentation, Putin showed a computer-animated video of an intercontinental ballistic missile flying around the Earth headed towards Florida's west coast, an area that news outlets at the time were quick to point out is very close to U.S. President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, which is actually on the east coast. So, I mean, it's in Florida. Is that really what they were saying? That's all? The speech drew international condemnation, but resonated across Russia, where Putin has sought to woo voters with promises of both guns and butter. To those who in the past 15 years have tried to accelerate an arms race and seek unilateral advantage against Russia, have introduced restrictions and sanctions that are illegal from the standpoint of international law aiming to restrain our nation's development, I will say this. Everything you have tried to prevent through such a policy has already happened. No one has managed to restrain Russia, he said. Nobody wanted to listen to us, so listen now. Yikes. The exotic weapons announced include a nuclear torpedo, that would be good for hurricanes, and a hypersonic weapon that can travel several times the speed of sound. One thing they all have in common is that they are designed to evade U.S. missile defense systems, which hints to where Russia's defense fears lie. I think the big picture here is that Russia is afraid of the U.S. missile defense systems, said James Acton, the co-director of the nuclear policy program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Putin has long promised to restore Russia to greatness on the world stage. Without the economic might and population of neighboring China or the diplomatic clout of the United States, Russia's nuclear weapons have played an outsized role in the country's conception of what it means to be a great power. Hacking didn't satisfy them, I guess. If Russia didn't have all these nuclear weapons and a relatively advanced military system, what else do they have? Williams said. Well, hacking. Here are the new missiles the U.S. military is responding to. There's the Skyfall, as mentioned earlier. That's NATO's designation for a missile. Russia calls the Borovesnik. Putin described the weapon, unnamed in 2018, as a low-flying stealth missile similar to a U.S. Tomahawk, equipped with a small-scale nuclear rocket engine. Putin said it has almost unlimited range and unpredictable trajectory. The United States experimented with developing a similar weapon in the 50s and 60s, known as SLAM. I don't know if we knew that name. It was ultimately abandoned as unrealistic, partly, as Russia may be discovering, due to the challenges of testing a nuclear-powered weapon. I place my money on Skyfall never being fielded, Acton said. There's more with cool names like the Satan II. I don't know if these are names I guess we're slapping on these things. Look, this one has an X in it too. A 200-ton intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of 11,000 kilometers. The SSX-30 Satan II, dubbed by Russia as the RS-28 Sarmat, I don't know why we don't just stick with their names, is planned to replace the legacy R-36M Voyevoda? You tell me. Putin claimed, that's why we don't stick with their names. Putin claimed the weapon's short boost phase will make it more difficult for U.S. missile defense systems to detect and intercept. Avangard, not avant-garde, but Avangard, a nuclear-capable ground-launched glide vehicle capable of flying at hypersonic speeds, which doesn't sound like a glider at all, defined as more than 5 times the speed of sound. That's hypersonic. The Avangard is said to be able to maneuver around U.S. missile defenses, making it absolutely invulnerable, according to Putin. Sure, why not? Once boosted to sufficient height by the Satan II, it is designed to separate from its rocket and cruise down towards its target through the atmosphere. The missile flies to its target like a meteorite, like a ball of fire, Putin said. Okay, sure. Poseidon is the next one. In February, Russia released the first video footage of what is now called the Poseidon, an unmanned nuclear-capable submarine with a miniature nuclear reactor. But Putin first revealed the development of the frightening new weapon during his 2018 State of the Union speech, claiming it can move intercontinentally at extreme depths, at speeds multiple times higher than the speed of submarines, which is not an international scientific standard, by the way. The speed of submarines. Okay. But okay, you're saying faster. And I guess it can go to extreme depths if it's unmanned. Or at least you're less worried about risking it. Finally, the dagger here. Putin also bragged about the Kinzhal, which means dagger. Kinzhal. See if I pronounced that anything close to correct. Check it by looking up how to say dagger in Russian. This is a nuclear-capable air ballistic missile that can reach hypersonic speeds and deliver both nuclear and conventional warheads. He claimed the weapon, which can be launched from Russia's bomber and interceptor aircraft, that's why it's an air ballistic missile, air-launched, we would call it ALCM, cruise missile. Although this is a ballistic missile, is that right? Yeah, okay, so, all right, an air-launched ballistic missile. Fine. This has a range of more than 2,000 kilometers and can maneuver to avoid U.S. missile defenses. It reportedly reached service in December of 2017, although, again, I'm not certain what the point of an air-launched ballistic missile is, but maybe I misunderstand things. Okay, so that was the entirety of the questioning of whether or not this Skyfall missile was in fact fake news. I meant then to head over to this article. Now I have the chance to do that. First we got to get this pop-up out of the way. Thanks to Brian Monroe for sending us this from Popular Mechanics. Courtney Linder files this story. Russia is sailing a, quote, floating Chernobyl into the Arctic. Doesn't that sound like a great idea? Environmentalists, it says, aren't happy about the seagoing reactor. Okay, what the hell is this? A 549-foot-long towed platform ship built in Russia is heading for the Arctic coast. But the ship setting sail, oh boy, ready for this one? Academic, that probably sounds like it's supposed to be academic, right? Akademik, Academic Lomonosov. Academic Lomonosov, maybe. Isn't exactly seen as innocuous by environmentalists. That's because it's carrying 2 nuclear reactors. That'll upset them. Greenpeace dubbed the ship the floating Chernobyl, and Chernobyl on ice. That's funny, except there's no ice up there anymore, which is not funny. Before it took off on its voyage, before this year's hit HBO series revived public interest in the 1986 nuclear disaster. Last week, the Academic Lomonosov left the Arctic port of Murmansk in northwestern Russia and will travel 3,100 miles on its maiden journey to the port of Pevek on the Chukotka Peninsula in the east. The trip should take 2 or 3 weeks to complete. Wow, okay, so when did it leave? Last week. That would have been, this is filed on the 26th, so Monday. Yeah, last week. So they're more than a third of the way there, if they are in fact underway. The ship, painted in the colors of the Russian flag, what a great idea. Donald Trump really approves of that one. And it's named for Mikhail Lomonosov, a Russian scientist and writer responsible for such contributions as the law of conversation. Well, it says conversation, but I'm assuming they mean conversion? Conservation, maybe rather? Conversation of mass. That can't be right. Conservation of mass, I would guess, in chemical reactions, and his discovery of Venus's atmosphere. Venus, of course, says, we already knew we had an atmosphere. Who are you to say you discovered it? All right. Between 2 the two 35-megawatt nuclear reactors on board. Is that big? Is that small? The ship is poised to supply electricity to settlements and firms extracting precious stones and hydrocarbons in the remote Chukotka area, a peninsula that's about as close as you can get to Alaska. How do you like that? In and around that Arctic region, about 2 million Russians reside in villages that are usually only reachable by ship or plane if the weather cooperates. However, those outlying areas are responsible for as much as 20% of Russia's GDP and are central to tapping into natural resources. The push into the Arctic is in part because Western Siberian hydrocarbons are waning, according to the Wilson Center's Kennan Institute, which is based in Washington, D.C., and studies post-Soviet Russia. Russia wants to tap into that zone, which is estimated to have about 13% of the world's oil, 30% of the world's natural gas, and other rare earth minerals. Okay, I mean, bad, but what can you do? While environmentalists are critical of the Lomonosov platform, saying that a massive wave could lead to nuclear meltdowns and that the introduction of nuclear power to the Arctic North would be devastating to the relatively untouched environment, Russian authorities say these claims are baseless. Nuclear watchdogs specifically pointed to the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan to discuss the risks of a seagoing reactor. Okay, so, not completely beyond the pale. Giant waves, right? In 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, I wonder how my Japanese pronunciation is, which is about 150 miles northeast of Tokyo, was triggered by the, Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. I don't remember that they had the name attached to it, but okay, now we have it. When the earthquake was detected, the earth shook. I got you. I've detected you there, earthquake. The active reactors automatically shut down their fission reactions. I see what they're talking about here, right? Okay, so the seismographs go off and you say, warning, you haven't felt this shock yet, but you should, what do they call it? Scram your reactor. Shut down the fission reactions, right? But due to an electricity failure, dang it, emergency diesel fuel generators, which powered pumps that cooled the reactor's core, started up. When the tsunami hit 46 minutes later, climbing over the plant's seawall and flooding the first 4 reactors, the emergency generators were killed, resulting in a loss of coolant and multiple nuclear meltdowns. I believe we have a multiple nuclear meltdown sound effect here somewhere, right? Yeah, there you go. That's the one. Okay, nevertheless, critics still say the key benefits of the Russian floating plant, including mobility and the ability to work in remote areas, are also downfalls as they complicate security procedures like routine disposal of nuclear fuel and rescue operations if the ship were to be hit by a massive wave or attacks of any kind, or a huge crowd of caribou, I guess, is also a possibility. Attacked by polar bears. Wow. Floating Chernobyl. I knew I had seen that headline, and I couldn't put my finger on it at the time when we were reading about the Skyfall missile. But I'm glad that Brian Monroe has found the thing and brought it to our attention. Plus, of course, it has taken us almost all the way to the next break. Oh, let's see. Here's some more information we can just toss in here before we have to take that break. And as it happens, it is a comment from Twitter friend with new Twitter handle, Asparagus Zucchini. How do you like that? Who has got a recorded segment for us, which will make a handy diversion as I spend the break and the 10 minutes following it trying to clear my throat. But let's see, he has chimed in here that Chernobyl had a graphite core and operated to produce weapons-grade plutonium, so the comparison is way off. Oh, the comparison to this ship, I guess. Well, certainly the graphite core played a large and prominent role in the television show. We all know about the dangers of exploding one of those things. Okay, the comparison is way off. I guess that's a small comfort, I think, in terms of floating nuclear reactors. Just generally speaking, I get nervous when the mission is to launch miniature nuclear reactors into low orbit or float two of them into the Arctic. And I guess if Chernobyl taught us anything, and it didn't, it just made us scared. But if it taught us anything, even if it was the wrong lesson, then that wrong lesson would be Russians just feel like they're not doing their best in terms of safety items, and I worry about it every time they put their hands on nuclear materials. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Okay, so as I mentioned to you before heading out on the break, we had the comment from Asparagus Zucchini, who we will refer to as, we'll give him a reporter-like name that he can use for the recorded piece that he actually sent me, unrelated to this. So he thought we would go with Gus Zucchini, Asparagus Zucchini. Now, why we landed on that name, I do not know, but we don't ask questions like that on this show, given that we all have ridiculous names on Twitter. But Gus Zucchini, let's just say it, Gus Zucchini has got this report for us from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Let me see if I can grab the article. I pocketed all of this stuff. This is, let's see, so a piece from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Where's my link to it? Which he helpfully reads for us. The mystery of missing votes deepens as Congress investigates Georgia, voting in Georgia. And, of course, that relevant in particular, or even more so now that they'll be voting for 2 Senate seats along with everything else down there in Georgia. Let me roll this out, and I think this will take us. I edited it down a little bit, not the content. I actually cleaned it up. Gus, you'll be happy to know how good you sound and all this. So let's roll that and make sure that we get it in there. And I think about 9 minutes or so. That'll give me a chance to organize for the final stretch. Definitely a few things I want to touch on before we go that harken back to stories we've already discussed early in the week and give you more background information. Just press the play button already. Okay.
This is an article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, August 28, 2019. Mystery of missing votes deepens as Congress investigates Georgia by Mark Niess. To find a clue about what might have gone wrong with Georgia's election last fall, look no further than voting machine number 3 at the Winterville train depot outside Athens. On machine number 3, Republicans won every race. On each of the other 6 machines in that precinct, Democrats won every race. The odds of an anomaly that large are less than 1 in 1 million, according to a statistician's analysis in court documents. The strange results would disappear if votes for Democratic and Republican candidates were flipped on machine number 3. It just so happens that this occurred in Republican Brian Kemp's home district, where he initially had a problem voting when his yellow voter access card didn't work because a poll worker forgot to activate it. At the time, Kemp was Secretary of State, Georgia's top election official, and running for governor in a tight contest with Democrat Stacey Abrams. The suspicious results in Winterville are evidence in the ongoing mystery of whether errors with voting machines contributed to a stark drop-off in votes recorded in the race for Georgia Lieutenant Governor between Republican Jeff Duncan, who ended up winning, and Democrat Sarah Riggs Amico. Even though it was the second race on the ballot, fewer votes were counted for lieutenant governor than for labor commissioner, insurance commissioner, and every other statewide contest lower on the ballot. Roughly 80,000 fewer votes were counted for lieutenant governor than in other down-ballot elections. The potential voting irregularities were included among 15,500 pages of documents obtained by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that had been turned over to the U.S. House Oversight and Reform Committee, which is looking into Georgia's elections. The documents provided under the Georgia Open Records Act offer details of alleged voting irregularities but no answers. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's office has refused to open an investigation. State election officials say the low number of votes could have been caused by low interest in the lieutenant governor's race or where that contest appeared on the ballot. The Georgia Supreme Court is also considering a challenge to the lieutenant governor's race. Duncan won by 123,000 votes, but the plaintiffs contend missing votes could have changed the results. The unresolved questions about the election have contributed to mistrust in the state's electronic voting system and questions about election officials' commitment to investigating complaints in a thorough and nonpartisan manner. State election officials say they have looked into the lieutenant governor's race but found no indication of problems with election equipment or vote counts. A sharp decline. There were 159,000 fewer votes in the lieutenant governor's race than the 3.9 million votes cast for the governor's race, a 4% drop-off rate. Other statewide races had about 2% fewer votes than the governor's race. It's not unusual for voters to skip down-ballot races, but normally there's a steady decline rather than an exceptional drop in the second most prominent contest. Voters deserve to know what happened, said Amico, who is not involved in court challenge and announced Tuesday that she's running for the U.S. Senate. There was insufficient action taken to secure the most foundational and basic element of our government, the right to vote. They don't want to look. The decline in votes showed up on ballots cast on the state's electronic voting machines in 101 of Georgia's 159 counties. On paper absentee ballots, there wasn't a significant decline in votes cast for lieutenant governor. In addition, the drop-off in votes grew more extreme in precincts with large African-American populations, according to an analysis by TargetSmart, a data tracking firm affiliated with the Democratic Party. Was this completely voter behavior and confusion, or was there something in the machine's software or hardware to cause this to happen? Asked Chris Brill, a senior data analyst for TargetSmart. I've never seen a drop-off pattern like this, ever. Georgia's 17-year-old electronic voting system is already riddled with potential vulnerabilities to hacking, tampering, and malfunctions, according to plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit who want voters to use hand-marked paper ballots. In a ruling this month, U.S. District Judge Amy Totenberg called the voting system unsecure, unreliable, and grossly outdated. The state's electronic machines lack a paper ballot that could be used to double-check the accuracy of digital results. Election officials purchased a $107 million voting system this month that will add computer-printed paper ballots to the voting process. The new system, which is scheduled for statewide use in March 24th presidential primary, combines touchscreens with printers that create a ballot that voters can review before inserting into scanners for tabulation. On Election Day last year, the Secretary of State's office conducted testing that mirrored the circumstances of the actual election, said Ryan Germany, the general counsel for the office. People cast randomized, videotaped mock votes in the office throughout the day. The results in video verified that votes exactly matched those recorded by the voting machines. Voters may have skipped the lieutenant governor's race because it appeared on the same screen as the governor's race, unlike in most years when there's also a U.S. Senate race alongside the governor's race, he said. I think some people thought they were voting as a ticket for governor and lieutenant governor, which happens in some states. It doesn't happen in Georgia, Germany said. Some bug in voting machines from our perspective would have had to appear in the checks that we did. Unanswered questions. Still, satisfying explanations are hard to come by. Why would voters skip the lieutenant governor's race on the electronic voting machines, but not on paper absentee ballots? Why would African American voters be disproportionately affected? If votes disappeared, could they have changed the results of the lieutenant governor's race? So far, state officials haven't dug more deeply to find out. Robin Crittenden, who filled in as Secretary of State for a few weeks after Kemp's election as governor, declined Amico's request for a recount because she didn't identify any specific errors in the election process. Crittenden wrote in November 17th letter that it's not unusual for voters to skip races, and voters aren't obliged to vote in every contest. A judge in January dismissed a case contesting Duncan's election, saying the plaintiffs didn't prove specific problems with recording of ballots that would alter the outcome of the contest. That's the case now pending with Georgia Supreme Court. There's a real wall up, and real obstacles prevent sunshine from coming in and having any kind of election transparency, said Marilyn Marks, the executive director for the Coalition for Good Governance, an election security group that filed the lawsuit. Let's find some facts. It's crazy to think that the paper ballot voters felt one way about the candidates and the machine voters felt another way. Coding for voting machines could have been incorrect on touchscreens so that votes for the lieutenant governor's race showed up in another contest, she said. The race could have been missing from some electronic ballots, or there could have been other malfunctions or programming errors. In the Winterville precinct, where one machine showed aberrant results, the elections director said she wasn't aware of the issue, but it didn't raise a concern to her. I've never heard of a flipped vote under direct recording electronic machines, said Charlotte Sotheby, the elections director for Athens-Clarke County. As for one candidate or one party getting more votes than another on the machines, that's not something that we track or is considered a red flag. County election officials ensure that the number of voters matches the number of ballots cast, Sotheby said. They also conduct logic and accuracy testing to ensure voting machines work correctly. They don't look for out-of-the-ordinary results. The most plausible explanation in the Winterville case is that misconfiguration caused votes for Republican candidates to be recorded as votes for Democratic candidates and vice versa, according to a paper published last month by Kelly Ottoboni and Philip Stark of the University of California, Berkeley Department of Statistics. The racial disparity in the undervote rate is harder to explain. Electronic voting machines have been targeted as a way to help people of different education and disabilities vote correctly, but the higher undervote rates for African American voters suggest that electronic voting harms historically disadvantaged groups, according to the findings of Ottoboni and Stark. Without more information, it's difficult to determine what could have gone wrong in the lieutenant governor's race. Critics of Georgia's voting machines fear the possibility of hacking, but it's unclear why a hack would target the relatively low-profile lieutenant governor's race rather than the heated race for governor, which Kemp won by nearly 55,000 votes, a margin of 1.4 percentage points. There were no reported allegations of erroneous results in the governor's race. Another possibility is that there was a computer error at some point in the election process, said Eddie Perez of the Open Source Election Technology Institute, which recommends hand-marked paper ballots. Election officials should check whether each race was coded correctly so that votes on touchscreens were correctly recorded on electronic ballots, he said. They should also look into the electronic programming process to ensure some races weren't left off some machines. I don't know why the state of Georgia appears to be resisting an examination, Perez said. They're not getting any closer to the truth. This really is unusual, and it begs explanation. At the end, it says here, support real journalism, support local journalism, subscribe to the Atlantic Journal-Constitution. Back to you, David.
All right. Thanks, Gus. And thanks for the little plug, I guess, for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who should pay me for that. Not really necessary, but I thought we should just keep that in there because, yeah, you should be paying for your journalism, and the possible exception, I guess, of the New York Times, with which everyone is mad. But then if you are paying for your journalism, then you have the right to complain about it and withhold your money later. So I don't know whether that's really a structure, the way we want to work things, but it's an option. Okay, let's see. I want to reset things a little bit on the volume there. I wanted to turn up Gus's report for everything here. But let's move on. Got a couple of things. It was already a crowded agenda before, but now it's been crowded by breaking news, for which I really need some kind of special sound effect. Let's see. I don't have anything like that newsroom sound. We could try this. Breaking news.
Boring.
Maybe that works. I guess that's the best thing I could. Or how about this?
Thank you, God.
Yeah, everyone loves breaking news, and thanks God for it. Comey, James Comey, who was under investigation, I guess, by the DOJ Inspector General's office. The report is out. Ryan Riley's is the first account of that report that I've been able to grab from HuffPost. James Comey's disclosure of Trump memos violated policy, DOJ watchdog finds. I'm not interested in defending Comey here, but I guess there have been some defenses offered. Here's what Riley has to say. The former FBI director violated department and FBI policies in his attempt to bring about the appointment of a special counsel, the IG said. Let's see if we can quickly get through this so we know what's going on. Former FBI Director Comey's retention, handling, and dissemination of certain memos regarding his interaction with President Donald Trump violated department and FBI policies. and his FBI employment agreement, the Justice Department's Inspector General found in a report released today, Thursday. The report found that Comey violated FBI policy and the requirements of his FBI employment agreement. That sounds familiar, like from the last paragraph, right? When he decided to disclose the contents of a memo to the New York Times through a friend, a move he made in hopes of bringing about the appointment of a special counsel. From the report, the following is a quote. He said he viewed the issue as one of incredible importance to the nation as a whole, and told us he felt that taking action was, quote, something I had to do if I love this country, and I love the Department of Justice, and I love the FBI. However, Comey's own personal conception of what was necessary was not an appropriate basis for ignoring the policies and agreements governing the use of FBI records, especially given the other unlawful and appropriate actions he could have taken to achieve his desired end. Comey noted on Twitter that the report, quote, found no evidence that Comey or his attorneys released any of the classified information contained in any of the memos to members of the media. I don't need a public apology from those who defamed me, but a quick message with a sorry we lied about you would be nice, Comey wrote on Twitter. Well, that ain't coming. But the IG said that Comey's actions were contrary to his duties. From the report, in a country built on the rule of law, do I have a laughter soundtrack for that? It is of utmost importance that all FBI employees adhere to the department and FBI policies, particularly when confronted by what appear to be extraordinary circumstances or compelling personal convictions. Comey had several other lawful options available to him to advocate for the appointment of a special counsel, which he told us was his goal in making the disclosure. What was not permitted was the unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information, investigative information, obtained during the course of FBI employment in order to achieve a personally desired outcome. I guess I will say this. That's the end of the report. The report of the report. The report itself is embedded in there if you would like to take a look at it. Mixed feelings on Comey in general. On the one hand, like I can get with the feeling of to hell with the regulations. This is the right thing to do for the country. I mean, on the other hand, when he did that last time, it turned out to be the exact opposite of the right thing to do for the country because we ended up with Trump. So he has not got a great record on freelancing, and so perhaps you might argue that Comey would have done best by abiding by guidelines every time, especially if the IG is correct in saying that there were lawful channels by which he could have reached the same end. Okay, I don't have much to offer you in the way of defense of Comey. However, I do note that there are such things in circulation. What did I just see? Andrew Prokop tweeting this. Let me open this up. And is a senior politics correspondent at Vox.com. Andrew writes, Comey getting dragged by the IG for technicalities involving the handling of classified information is, well, and he has two screen grabs that he highlights here. Screen grab from the report. Number one here, the FBI's Safeguarding Classified National Security Information Policy Guide clearly states that, quote, any person who has knowledge of that classified information that has been or may have been lost, compromised, or disclosed to an unauthorized person must immediately report the circumstances to his or her security office. And the highlighted portion reads, Comey violated this requirement by failing to immediately inform the FBI that he provided Memo 2 to his attorneys. Okay. By not immediately reporting that he had provided Memo 2 to his attorneys when Comey first learned that the FBI had designated a small portion of Memo 2 as classified at the confidential level, Comey violated FBI policy. So I see here, I guess the point is that it's a pretty minimalist thing here. They're claiming that he broke policy by not reporting himself for having given a memo to a member of the press when he found out that that memo had, I think I'm gathering from this way it's put later on, been classified. Here's the deal. How classified was it? Of the memos Comey shared with his attorneys, Memo 2 contained 6 words that the FBI determined in June of 2017 to be classified at the confidential level. 6 words. Well, could they be like really super important words? Well, more from Andrew Prokop here. Really secret stuff here. He says, classification system is great, and we do have big problems with that. 4 of the 6 words in Memo 2 that the FBI determined were classified were the names of foreign countries being discussed by the president. Sometimes that can be troublesome, right? As described later in this report, the president referenced the countries when he conveyed his personal views on the relative importance of promptly returning telephone calls from the leadership of the named countries. In other words, the president named 4 countries that he thought were really important. And, I can see that they might say, well, we would prefer that the rest of the world not, learn that they're all second-class countries in the minds of the President of the United States. But, that's pretty minimally damaging, let's say. And Comey doesn't need my defense, and I don't really particularly feel like sticking with the subject. But I thought I'd at least provide that to you by way of context. All right. That leaves us about a little less than 10 minutes to get through the rest of this stuff here. Some of these things will have to wait until tomorrow or later. Let me see what I think makes the most sense in terms of using up the balance of our time. Okay. Maybe because the Lawrence O'Donnell story was such big news in the morning. We'll try this one. The New York Times is sort of diving into this. The Trump secrets hiding inside Deutsche Bank. The president's longtime lender has extensive documents related to Mr. Trump's personal and business finances. Here's what they could reveal. And they're not saying that they have revealed them, but what they could. This will give us, I guess, some sense of whether or not we eventually expect O'Donnell's story to bear out. David Enrich is the writer on this piece. Deutsche Bank's disclosure on Tuesday that it has tax returns related to President Trump's family or business set off a frenzy of speculation about what those materials might reveal. But a trove of other data and documents that his longtime lender is sitting on might prove more revelatory to investigators digging into Trump's finances. That includes records of how Trump made his money, whom he has partnered with, the terms of his extensive borrowings, and what transactions he is engaged in with Russians or other foreign nationals. For nearly 2 decades, Deutsche Bank was the only mainstream financial institution consistently willing to do business with Trump, who had a long record of defaulting on loans. The bank, over the years, collected reams of his personal and corporate information. 2 congressional committees have subpoenaed Deutsche Bank for a vast array of records related to Trump, including any tax returns since 2010. The investigators are hoping the materials will shed light not only on the president's finances, but also on any links he has to foreign governments and whether he or his companies were involved in any illegal activity, such as money laundering for people overseas. Here is what might be lurking in Deutsche Bank's electronic vaults about the president, his family, and his businesses. After the 2 House committees subpoenaed the bank, Mr. Trump sued to block it from complying. The case is pending with a federal appeals court. In a court filing on Tuesday, Deutsche Bank confirmed that it has at least some of the tax returns that were demanded by the congressional committees. The filing didn't disclose whose returns the bank possesses or for what years, but current and former bank officials have told the Times that Deutsche Bank has the first several pages of Trump's returns for multiple years. That would have the bottom line critical information that they needed to make those loans, and that we'd like to know about too, although we really need details. Beyond that, congressional investigators are seeking dozens of other items. The list on the subpoena is 6 pages of single-spaced type. The request would cover most, if not all, of the extensive documentation Deutsche Bank has amassed about Trump's businesses and personal finances. That includes info about his corporate balance sheet, income from various assets, and documents that map out how his businesses are set up. While Deutsche Bank has been lending to Trump since 1998, the most detailed information would cover the period since 2011, when the company's private banking division struck up a relationship with the future president and his family. These documents can tell us a lot, this next section says, but in pieces. For a president who has kept his business affairs largely hidden from public view, the materials would together provide the most complete picture yet of Trump's finances. Trump broke with decades of precedent, as you know, by not releasing his federal returns. The summary pages of the returns alone would not illuminate Trump's income sources or his business partners. On the other hand, the tax return summaries likely would show whether Trump has paid any taxes in recent years. We already know that Trump for many years avoided paying federal income taxes, but the tax documents coupled with other financial materials that the bank has would likely fill in some of the gaps about the true extent of Trump's fortune, which is described as being in the billions of dollars. In addition, materials that the congressional committees have subpoenaed, including anything relating to the due diligence the bank conducted before agreeing to lend him money, could contain new information about where and with whom Trump, his companies, and his family have been earning money. The files may shed light on any dealings with Russia by Trump or his family. Since before Trump was elected president, critics of the president have speculated that Russian companies or individuals were secretly providing him with financial assistance, possibly via Deutsche Bank. It isn't hard to understand how such speculation got started. Deutsche Bank has a long history of operating in Russia, working with Kremlin-linked companies and laundering money for wealthy Russians. It just says so right there. Trump has a history in Russia as well. He once staged the Miss Universe pageant there, sold a mansion to a Russian billionaire for $95 million, of course. During the 2016 campaign, Trump's company was looking to build a tower in Moscow with the help of a Russian bank, VTB, that has long-running ties to Deutsche Bank. And, of course, Russia interfered in the presidential election, seeking to tilt it in Mr. Trump's favor. So far, though, no evidence has emerged that shows Deutsche Bank's extensive lending to Trump, a total of well over $2.5 billion since 1998, was connected to the Russian government, companies, or individuals. Numerous current and former Deutsche Bank executives, including those with direct knowledge of the loans, have said the loans made since 2011 were financially attractive to the bank because Trump agreed to personally guarantee much of them. And in other words, if he were to default, Deutsche Bank would be able to seize his personal assets, including tens of millions of dollars that he kept in accounts at the bank. Still, Deutsche Bank's internal files will most likely contain additional information about at least some dealings with Russia, although not necessarily involving Trump himself. Congressional investigators subpoenaed any materials about suspicious activity that the banks detected in the accounts of Trump, his company, or his family members, including Jared Kushner, his son-in-law and advisor. In 2016, Tammy McFadden, a former anti-money laundering compliance officer at the bank, flagged transactions connected to Kushner as potentially suspicious. Those transactions involved money flowing to Russian individuals, and Deutsche Bank's files almost certainly include more information. So, yes, there's a treasure trove to be discovered there. My own speculation about it, it makes a certain amount of sense that they might have leaned on Russian figures to, if not literally co-sign for his loans, then perhaps in some way guarantee or collateralize his loans. Why would Russians agree to do that? Probably as part of their money laundering efforts. They were already laundering money through Deutsche Bank as it was, and they had pretty infamously been laundering money through Trump properties too. You can happily pay above market rates for a Trump brand condo somewhere and either use it yourself or, by the way, send your wife or girlfriend there to have their kids born in the United States and have dual citizenship, as is the case down in Florida very often. But at the very least, even if you overpay for the condo, you can later sell that asset on the American market for clean cash. So it's, in the end, worth losing money. It's something that they're willing to put up with. Pay $2 million for a condo, but the money is stolen, and convert it into money that you have legal title to, and it is clean, even if it's only half that, $1 million. $2 million that you can't move because it's stolen isn't worth anything. You can't use it for anything, but $1 million in clean cash is $1 million. So they do it. So why guarantee Trump's loans at all? Well, if Trump is out of credit and can't continue building things or can't partner with people to put up operations like, the Trump Soho or something like that. In other words, if it's such a great deal for Russian oligarchs to launder money through real estate because there weren't as many regulations about, if you show up and buy an apartment or a condo for cash, the salespeople can voluntarily look the other way and not look into where the money is coming from. It's very easy, and it's exempt from a lot of tighter regulations that you find in banks. So if it's such a great deal to buy Trump condos and resell them at a loss even for cash, it's in their interest to be able to keep the pipeline of Trump condos open. And if Trump can't get loans to enter into deals to keep the pipeline open, it's in their interest to co-sign or lend him the money or somehow guarantee the loan so that he can go ahead and do that stuff. It makes a certain amount of sense, and I think that that's why, in the end, you'll likely find out that there's some truth to it. Why Mueller didn't bring it up, we would have to do some more thinking and probing about, but it may just be that he thought it was outside of his purview. We'll see whether that's a conclusion that makes any sense, perhaps later in the week. And for now, stay tuned for Justice Putnam to bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with these stories and more from around the world and around the country after these brief messages.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Lots happening, not the least of which is Representative Katie Porter visited three different facilities near the California-Mexico border to see how migrants were being treated at different points in their journeys. That sounds like an important investigation. I'd love to hear what she has to say about that. You can hear it from Justice directly next.